Hello and welcome. My name is Arjun Vishwanathan. I'm the co-founder at Sarsi, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome each of you to yet another episode of our video series that we've titled Igniting Abilities. Igniting Abilities, in a sense, is a video series aimed at uncovering and discovering various solutions that have emerged in the technology sector to enable persons with disabilities to do far, far more and achieve greater heights. And to join me today in this particular episode, I'm extremely pleased to present Pramit Bhargav, who is the founder of Louise Voice. Pramit, welcome and an absolute delight to have you with us, Chief.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Pramit, we've obviously seen, heard, read so much about Louise Voice. Uh, of course, I'd like you to take us through it, take us through the whole solution, but also dwell perhaps a bit on what prompted you to bring in the whole concept of Louis Voice into the world.
Sure. So I'll first start off with just the concept of what is Louis Voice. So basically, the idea behind Louis Voice is that a user should be able to give voice
Would you
commands.
like to increase your volume a little bit? You're just a little muffled.
Oh, it actually is. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Pramit, this whole conversation on igniting abilities. So, my intent is to understand from you and for the purpose of the larger audience, what is Louis Voice and what really prompted you to bring this in?
Right. So first, I'll just start with the concept of Louis Voice. So the whole idea with Louis Voice is just think of Louis Voice like a virtual friend. A user should be able to give commands, voice commands to Louis, and be able to do each and everything, end-to-end transactions within an app. As an example, I used to, by the way, I'm visually impaired, so I'll tell you my story as well. But I used to move around and book Uber, and often, even using a screen reader, I would have challenges. Have I got my destination right? Is the payment method right? What if it's cash? I can't count notes that well. I can't count notes at all. I always used to think life will be so simple. What if I can just give voice commands and just be able to do book my Uber or order food on Zomato or order a pizza from Domino's, do some shopping. So that was really how this whole idea came in. And we are a 5-year-old startup. We developed this whole technology completely in-house on our own. And like I said, we are enabling users to do end-to-end transactions with the Louis Voice. I'll also quickly give my background. So I
Of
used
course.
to be cited. I'm a computer engineer from IIT BHU, went to IIM Bangalore. And then I worked with companies like Hindustan Unilever, Motorola, Quest Diagnostics. And while I was with levers, there was a medicine given to me for joint pains that reacted on the retina. And my
Ouch.
vision almost literally overnight, it just dropped. I continued to work, I could get some correction. The funny thing with that was that my joint pains disappeared, but of course, it left behind a lower vision. And then about 10 years, 11 years back, when it dropped again, and then I realized I can't read anything at all. I saw things going up and down like a wave, and then everything got wavy, foggy. So today I can't read anything. I have some kind of a gross peripheral vision. And so Louis Voice is in a way trying to solve my own challenges. So you can imagine the different kind of drive that comes in, that this is something that really
Absolutely.
needs to be done.
No, I couldn't agree more with what you've said, Pramit. And I think it's a brilliant solution that you brought out. How really does it work? If you could just kind of expand on that for the benefit of all our viewers.
Right. So, like I said, we are a 5-year-old startup. We initially started off with a consumer app, which was on Android only, and we had users across some 110 countries. So it was very clear that this is a global technology for of great relevance. We couldn't do iOS because iOS architecture is a bit close. There were also issues of sustainability that look for any social impact venture to really be able to create an impact. It's very important that one is able to sustain, one is able to cover one's cost. You can't keep depending upon getting some kind of grants or this or that. Nobody can feed you for that long. So what we have now moved to is a different business model where instead of a B2C, we are now talking to app owners directly. So it's more like a B2, B2C. So for example, we already have two customers. One of them has gone live. So there is a bank, South Indian Bank.
Okay.
So now a user can just give voice commands and would be able to do UPI transfers. This is live now. We'll do something like 22 transactions. So essentially, all banking transactions within South Indian Bank will be voice enabled across some 8 languages. There is similarly a mutual fund, and right now we're talking to a lot of players in the financial sector. I think initially focusing more on financial inclusion, but like I said, with Louis, it's sector agnostic. So one should be able to order a pizza or order grocery or whatever with equal ease, or get their Uber. So I think all that will follow as we move on. The idea is to globally talk to app owners directly and build the app directly with them.
So, in a sense, in many ways, it's like Alexa. You just talk to the software and it gets the job done for you. Why don't you expand? And if you could expand on that user experience or user journey, really. Like, I spent a considerable amount of time on your website and it says book an Uber. Now, so what is the process of doing that? Do I have to open the Uber app? What do I have to
Okay. So it's a bit like on the surface, it does look a bit like all these biggies, Google Assistant, Alexa, Siri,
Siri?
but yes and no. So the
Okay.
only thing common is that you can give voice commands.
All right.
However, our focus, like I said, I was really trying to solve my own problem, and nothing can be as real as that. So the big difference is that if you look at Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, they all work on a single transaction basis, which means I give
Indeed.
them a command, they will do something, not do something, and then go silent. They
Absolutely.
don't do these end-to-end transactions. They'll do a little bit of here, there. But for example, they will not do end-to-end banking transactions. They will not let you book Uber end-to-end. And which is what you would have seen also on the videos where we showed with Google Assistant
Indeed.
Siri, that other than opening the app, or Google will tend to go into Google search, but nothing really happens. Now, because we came from a different angle, and I think Arjun, that's very important to sort of appreciate. A, I was trying to solve my own problem. B, we started off thinking of a blind person. So actually, our core use cases of a blind. Now,
Indeed.
when you now nobody A in his right mind, and I'm a little mad that way, but nobody in his right mind will ever build a business thinking of a blind person. But because we started that way, imagine the whole experience had to be different. So we had to handhold the person. That means there has to be continuous interaction. Right now, there is no other voice app which does this continuous interaction. And trust me, it's very, very difficult.
So,
Yeah.
so tell me something. For example, you spoke about the South Indian Bank.
Yes.
Give me an example of a classic banking transaction. So, suppose I want to transfer some money to my mom
Right.
from my bank account into her, let's say, SBI bank account.
Right.
What would be
So,
the journey?
yeah. So basically, see, the way it happens with is that inside the South Indian Bank, right, there is a microphone button, and the moment user turns it on, the voice takes over. Now, another technology that we have built is what we call humanoid screen controller, whereby basically just think of it like it. Let's say there's a normal user. The way they touch the screen and they perform gestures on the screen, the same thing is being done by Louis Voice, which is more like a virtual user. So therefore, what happens is that if I, for example, were to say transfer 50 rupees to Arjun, so it will of course first ask, do you want to do a bank transfer or a UPI transfer?
Indeed.
And then if it's, let's say, a bank transfer, right? And then it automatically will pick up instant IMPS, it will pick up the amount, and it will look for an Arjun. If there are multiple Arjun, then it will of course clarify,
Lovely.
right? If there is one, then it will automatically just take it, go forward, do a reconfirmation. It's like just like a way human interaction will happen, right? At the end of it, a human will say, "Look, I'm sending it. Just confirm." So it does that, and out the money goes. So
Oh,
it can be
lovely.
really quick.
And the entire OTP process, of course, is anyways through the phone. Does that also get authenticated by voice?
So, okay, so as far as OTP is concerned, see, basically we follow the RBI guidelines. So RBI
Of
is
course.
very clear that there have to be two-factor authentication, whatever the
Indeed.
bank customer decides. Now, with OTP, of course, it can automatically be picked up by the bank app also, right? So this is something that we work it out with the particular bank. We do have the capability of doing it through voice also.
Oh, lovely. And is that in the offing to be able to enter, or would that require any kind of regulatory clearance?
No, it's more up to individual banks. So I think
I
you will
see.
see some of our customers, so it's completely up to them. I think what's happening is that because this is the first app, first financial app in the world to have actually gone, through such, end-to-end transaction. So I think gradually, as more and more people come in, I think what I would prefer as a user is an option where I can either enter it manually, or I have an option to speak it through voice through my voice command as well. So
Lovely.
I guess gradually both will come in. So if
No,
I'm
of
at
course.
home, then there is nothing like giving a voice pin. So if I'm doing UPI transfer, I mean nothing more convenient than that.
No, of course, I couldn't agree more. But Pramit, that also brings me to a very curious. I was very curious about this. It's an interesting question. Therefore, how does Louis Voice stand differentiated from a lot of the uh, uh, accessibility features that you find today in pretty much all the smartphones? Um and I understand that you say they will perform single point transactions as compared to an end-to-end journey.
Right.
But in that sense, uh, would any user be able to make a distinction between, let's say, the accessibility controls on a smartphone versus a Louis Voice?
See, okay, so when we say accessibility control, so one is of course, these voice solutions which are there, which I compared Google Assistant, Alexa, Siri.
Of course, of course.
Other than that, there is of course a screen reader, which is a basic tool. Screen reader is something which all visually impaired people will definitely require. Talking of disability in general, so one can either use a screen reader, but screen reader is more like a passive tool. So whatever you touch on the screen, it just gives a
Of
voice
course.
feedback. It's not really a voice interaction medium, right? So other than that, there is something called voice control, voice assist, which Android and iOS have, which is actually not meant for visually impaired, but which
Okay.
is okay for if I'm disabled, I'm able to look at the screen. I can say, okay, do this, do that, but you have to click. So, the difference is, so it's almost like with Louis, I can give an intuitive human command. So if you look at it, users, our needs are very basic. I may say transfer 50 rupees to Arjun. That's all my need is. I can say that to Louis, it will do it. But if I'm using like a voice control, which is on iPhone or voice assist on Android, I have to literally say that, look, go to search bar, click on this button. So instead of actually doing it manually, I just give it voice command. It's extremely painful. So
Now,
that's
how
why
does it?
my belief is that something which is as intuitive as Louis is really the way to go.
And for example, there is as we're speaking, this is getting more and more interesting. Is, for example, booking an Uber. Now, many times, often when I've been in Delhi and I've tried to book an Uber, I've found it troublesome sometimes to get the app to pick up the right address
Right.
for various reasons. Uh, uh, so, how does Louis Voice assist, enable, and enhance that entire experience?
See, one thing which will sound without being arrogant, but one thing which I'll tell you is that we have our own voice model which can
Okay.
support like 40 languages of the world.
Oh, lovely.
And we have, in fact, 3 days back, we benchmarked it against the Google voice model as well as that of Amazon. And it's more accurate. And it's more accurate on two fronts. So one is the name of the person or the places, and the another is the amount, so especially in the financial sector. See, in the financial sector, for example, if I say 900, it better be 900 rupees, right? It can't be 9 rupees
Yeah,
or
don't want to
9,000
be
rupees.
sending one extra zero to
Correct.
anybody.
Correct. And Arjun can't be become Arun, all of that.
Indeed, so.
So it is actually very accurate, and we have been focusing very hard because see, what you have to see is I think the difference in our approach and others is what I've seen talking to a lot of people is most people look at voice as a technology problem. So
Of
therefore,
course.
they'll ask for things like percentage accuracy and all that. We have always looked at it as a user problem. So the whole idea is how do we make it work for the end user, right? That's what is more important. So therefore, the approaches that we take to fix things, etc., are therefore very different. And we focus more on usability of it and how do we make it work for the particular context of that app.
It's interesting that you mentioned this because when you said we've kept the user's problem and the user central to the development and the production of the solution. Now, there's this very nice saying that says in India, every 100 or 150 kilometers, the dialect changes. And
Right.
so do pronunciation and diction and so on and so forth. So I'm assuming you've taken care of that also to a large degree, which is that many people have various ways they pronounce a few things, and there's a stark difference. So have you taken that also into consideration somewhere, Pramit?
So yeah, so the best example I'll give you. So core languages, yes. So for example, in India we can do about 10 languages, but
All
I'll give you
right,
the example of when we had users for this consumer app. We had users across 110 countries.
all
The
right.
app was only in English. Now you can imagine the within India, people speak English in so many accents. So South Indian English is very different from North
Different.
Indian.
So
And then
true.
imagine somebody in UK, US, Africa, South Africa. The again, so it's very different. And number two, we also had users. So, for example, we had users who had speech impairment, right?
Okay.
So in their case, so today actually the technology has become such that a lot of these models are actually trained on a global basis,
Of course.
right? So it's able to take in those difference in accents to a great degree. And
Oh,
like I
that's
said, in our case, what happens, because when we create, so there's something called an intent engine. So the heart of a voice app is the intent engine. So figuring out what's the intent of the user. So if a user might have said a certain word, right, but what really does he want to do? So that intent engine we actually create completely bottom up for the context of every consumer app. So every app that we are voice enabling, there is a separate intent engine for that, and
tell me.
that makes it really powerful.
No, of course, I couldn't agree more with you, and that's fascinating, really. But tell me something, Pramit. As you move along in this journey of enhancing the app in the weeks and the months and the years to come, are you also consciously going to be looking at artificial intelligence and maybe machine and deep learning for Louis Voice to, at some point in time in the future, perhaps, to be able to understand my patterns to a certain degree, and also, therefore, intuitively predict what I would like to do next?
Right.
Which is the app going to continue learning through itself?
See, I think so. You're absolutely right. See, a lot of AI related technologies, NLP, etc., all those are of course already in use, including figuring out the intent, because that's really how it happens.
Of course,
With large language models, etc., coming in, and like you said, the whole that whole learning capability, being
of
able to
course,
train on a particular data set. I think all of that is actually, so this whole technology is, I can tell you, moving very very fast.
of
So
course
we
it
have to be
is.
constantly on top of the game, and the game is now more and more, if you ask me, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about being smart to be able to leverage whatever existing technologies that will enable us to give a better experience for our user. So that's what really is the game. And we are constantly, hunting for better technologies. And if that is not there, we build the technology ourselves. So that's
And
that's our approach.
no, I think that's fantastic, really. And tell me something. I'm also curious to know: is there a reservoir or a repertoire of voice commands that I normally will tend to use within a particular app that I can automatically store for it to be used, or does it necessarily need me to say the same thing? I'm not trying to broad base Louis Voice
Yeah,
into an area where, like you yourself said, initially it was made keeping somebody with a visual handicap in mind,
correct,
or a visual impairment in mind, beg your pardon. But tomorrow, like you rightly yourself said, for somebody with a slight bit of speech impairment, perhaps,
correct.
uh, somebody with some other similar kind of a challenge, do you think it could expand to that universe too?
Yeah, so it already is happening. So I'll tell you how we have always approached it. So if you look at Google Assistant, Alexa, a lot of times when they come up with new features, they'll often say this for this to happen.
Of course, of
Right.
course.
So I can also, you can try it out on your Alexa. Just say BBC News and say play BBC News. Now these are two set of words. It's supposed to do the same thing, right? But you'll find
Logical.
it actually does different things. BBC News, it plays something else, play BBC, some plays something else. So what the way we have done it is, we start off with a broad-based approach, where like I said, the whole idea is, if I want to, let's say, for example, want to know my account balance,
Hmm.
right? Now today nobody speaks pure Hindi. So if I say Khata Rashi, probably nobody is going to understand.
It's like what the kind of instructions they use on an airplane. Apatkali sthiti. I mean, nobody uses all of that.
Nobody uses it, right? But people are likely to say, "मेरे खाते में कितना पैसा है? How much money is there account in my account?" Those kind of things. So that kind of lingo, without putting any restriction and being able to intuitively give these commands and be able to figure out. So that's the approach we take. And you're absolutely right. So in our case, what has happened is, over the years, what we have realized is that we started focusing, like I said, the core use cases of a blind person. But we have been finding people with speech impairment, people with disability. In fact, in financial inclusion, a lot of focus is on people who are unbanked, who may be
Of course,
illiterate.
of course.
People who are literate, but there is a lot of us. I can tell you, a lot of young people in our office who are financially illiterate. So they don't know how to do something. They don't know how to sort of get something done. With voice, the good thing is I don't need to know if I have to transfer money to somebody. Rest of it, Louis Voice takes over. You don't have to worry about what buttons to click, this, that, etc., etc. So I think it's becoming already fairly mainstream, where it would be used. Elderly, for example, is a very significant use case, and if you see not only in India, in globally, elderly would be a very significant
Of
use case.
course.
Of course, there may be some disability, etc., also, which they may have. But so I think it is already broad based, and the way we are also making it. So, as an example, let's say if there is a person who's sighted, maybe disabled, but then he can see the screen.
Of
Now,
course.
let's say there are three Arjuns. Now, Louis may be reading one after another, but it may say take the third one because they can see it. A blind cat. So we have
Indeed.
taken both the cases, where we are able to say if somebody says third one, we are still able to take that, or or somebody who can see the screen might also click on the screen. Even while the voice session is happening. So we have taken a lot of such things into account, basically trying to say that, okay, what are the different kind of users? How are they likely to use the app?
I
And
think you
therefore,
have a
how
very,
to,
very powerful story going in terms of the sheer fact that you spoke about fiscal inclusion for
right,
the unbanked.
right,
I can just imagine the number of people that we can get into the folds of the banking system by means of, and specifically speaking about those who may not be classically literate in being able
right,
to read or write, but to just be able to speak, I think is a very powerful story to get your banking needs and demands fulfilled. So I think that's fantastic. But I do have a view on the clock. Pramit, so really tell me, where to next as far as Louis Voice is concerned, and what's your business model? You spoke about a consumer version of it, which has been it's been there for a while now, and now I understand that there's also going to be a so-called enterprise version, if I may be allowed to.
right.
Why don't you give us and navigate us through that journey? How's it panning
Yeah.
out?
So purely in a business sense, see, we had this consumer app. We are not very actively supporting it. It already has users in 110 countries.
All
But
right,
basically, the challenges were that one, we couldn't do iOS, right? So we were
of
anyway
course.
limiting it to a few countries. That was one. Secondly, the challenge was that if you look at, let's say, just I'm just looking at disability in general, the level of employment is very low. It's just about 35-40%, right? So, the impact part of it, we know intuitively that this is something useful, but the ability of this population to pay, there are, of course, people on iOS who can pay $3, $4 per month, and then, most people can't. So the challenge was, how do we monetize this? How
Of
do we
course.
become sustainable, profitable? Because then only a real impact will come, right? The impact will not come otherwise. So this is where we move to this enterprise model, which is an SDK based model, where we SDK is like a software plugin. We give it to the consumer, to the customer app, and it just becomes voice enabled using that. Now there the benefit is we are charging the app owner, the customer. For the end user, it remains free, and we now with our SDK we can do both Android and iOS.
Oh,
So,
lovely.
so it's like a win-win. If you ask me, the customer who has to gain a lot, he pays us, and they pay us on a annual recurring basis. The end user, both Android and iOS can use it. They don't have to pay anything. So I think that's the so it's sort of a win-win solution for everybody, and it will help us be sustainable as well.
So your journey as far as Louis Voice is concerned, what do we expect in terms of innovation in the months to come, if not the years?
See, I think one, like you mentioned, technology is changing all the
Of
time, and the
course.
ability to leverage technology to do things better and better, make it more intuitive, like even you said, anticipate usage, etc., or at least learn from the past patterns, right? So a lot of that I think will keep improving as we go along. The other thing is that it's very important that this SDK, this enterprise model has just gone in couple of customers. It's very important for us to prove it, and prove it not only in India. And I feel very proud that it's a completely made in India,
Indeed so.
technology. But we want to take it to the world, and we want to serve not just what we started with, visually impaired, but disabled, elderly, financially illiterate. There's so many segments, even sighted people who can actually benefit from using voice. So I think that's the other second challenge. And then of course, as we focus more on financial inclusion, we want to be able to get into other sectors as well. So for
Yes.
example, it could be shopping. That could be another one. Because see, one thing which I've realized, And there's something I think very important is that, because when disability hits people, I think one important thing to realize is that, of course, one or two faculties may go down,
Of
but
course.
fundamentally their aspirations remain the same. So they
So
also
true.
want to shop, they also want to order a pizza, right? They also want to move on Uber from one place to another. I
So
think
true.
that's where, when we're able to make it really, mainstream across sectors, across the world, I think that's really the direction where we want to go into, and that is when I'll, feel that. And somewhere, see, right now we are the only app, we are the only SDK in the world, voice SDK, which can do things end to end. So the other thing is, if, of course, more competitors will come in, and that will be welcome, because if we can be the catalyst for, just like there was a keyboard interface, now of course there is touch interface. Tomorrow, I have a feeling in next 3 to 5 years, every consumer app will need to have a voice
Voice
interface. So
interface.
that's what really what I'm looking for.
No, fantastic. And currently, how many users do you have? You mentioned you're across 100, 110 odd countries. How many users do you have?
So, okay, so that app actually, like I said, we don't support
You
it
don't support
actively
it
now.
anymore.
There
Okay.
has been no advertising, nothing. So we have actually
Okay.
got a rich set of customers who actually give us a lot of feedback. Now with these, that's the other thing. The scale will start coming when we start working with these customers directly. So, for example, a South Indian bank has got several million customers,
Of course.
right? So the way they can scale it up, because they can advertise the discovery of the app within their app, of the SDK within their app, just this voice solution. So I think that will also scale it up. And once somebody starts mass advertising, I think the game will change completely.
No, fantastic. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you, Pramit. This has been truly fascinating to just understand the journey and a little bit to understand the man behind the technology. Pramit Bhargav, what are your interests? How do you wind down after a long day at work? What do you do?
See, okay, so first thing is, see, and there's something, I'll tell you. So I'm not doing a job, let me put it this way.
Indeed, sir.
So when you're trying to solve your own problem, this whole winding up, winding down, extricating yourself from out of the, was actually sara mix ho jata. It's part of
जी,
your life. So
बिल्कुल.
that's one part. Other things which I love to do. So I'm heavily into books, audiobooks, because I have to hear
Lovely.
everything. I love to sit in the garden, just have relaxing time, listening to birds, etc., listening to my audio, and then cooking. Cooking, I have, it's a wonderful stress buster. I don't follow any rules of the kitchen, so I am extremely creative, which means one day I'll make something wonderful, another day the same thing will be a disaster. But Amit eats it all. So, but it's something really fun.
No, and you mentioned books.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating because I'm quite an avid reader myself. Uh, Three essential books that you'd like to prescribe to our viewers that are a must read for all folks in this day and age.
Uh, okay. No, so let me talk more about the genre. So one, I'm also into meditation and
Got it.
spirituality. So there's a, especially in evenings, etc. I like to listen to spiritual books. So there it can be. I can suggest books like, of course, Autobiography of a Yogi by
Ah, of
Swami.
course.
So that is Paramans Yoganand. So that's
I know.
one, right? The other area that I focus on is business. So in
Got it.
fact, podcasts are another one. So when you're talking of books, podcast can be another great way of learning and keeping yourself completely abreast on a global basis what's happening. So business is another one. And third is, I read, for example, mostly non-fiction, but one fiction which I read and which I think is God's gift to mankind. And if you haven't read it, please do. PG Woodhouse. So
Oh, of
those books are
course.
absolutely hilarious. So that's
Hilarious.
no nothing as like a stress buster here as this one is.
Oh, fantastic. This has been truly a revolution of sorts, Pramit. But that's pretty much what we have time for. It's been an absolute delight speaking with you, Pramit. And from all of us here at SARC, we'd like to thank you for coming on Igniting Abilities. This is a video series and episode sets that we truly are attempting as an endeavor to inspire a new generation of persons and of course persons with disabilities into being able to you know walk the walk and talk the talk as far as their dreams are concerned and their aspirations are concerned, and to be able to achieve individually as well as together as society so much more. So thank you very, very much. It's been an absolute delight speaking with you, Pramit.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was I, Arjun Vishwanathan, in conversation with Pramit Bhargav on Igniting Abilities, talking about Pramit's solution called Louise Voice. Go check it out. Uh, and thank you very much for joining all of us.